switching to criminal, hypothetically, what criminal exposure might a private foundation expose itself to uh, if one of its grantees is connected, I'll say, to violence?
It's not so clear because there is not a an enormous history of grantors being held liable civilly or criminally for the actions of their grantees. But theoretically, um, a grantor who knows that their grants are going to organize illegal activity, certain what are known under um, the racketeering statutes as predicate acts. If you know that your money is going to fund, organize, develop predicate criminal actions, um, it is plausible that you could be prosecuted for conspiring to advance those acts. Um, this is not it's not really a novel legal theory. It would be novel in its application, um, which is not to say that it would be the first time that a nonprofit faced um, criminal liability. Um, it would take things to the next level. That might be what's warranted here. We can talk about that. I think that is probably the greatest vulnerability in terms of the criminal law that nonprofits face in the civil terrorism space.
By which you mean, and you write about this in your article, RICO. Uh,
Yeah, there's federal RICO, there are state RICO analogs. Um, Essentially, these are prohibiting criminal conspiracies. Um, yeah.
this there have there been any successful RICO suits against nonprofit funders or funders of nonprofits?
There were criminal conspiracy suits against um, KKK chapters, which I believe were organized as 501(c)(3)s at the time, or the analog at the time. Uh, but no, on the whole, this would be a fairly novel application, certainly as it comes to grantors and grantees.
Yeah. I mean, I think there was an attempted RICO usage against abortion protesters, actually, which gave rise to the FACE Act. And in the Cop City case, the counts were just dismissed. Someone would say that's on procedural grounds, but nonetheless, they were dismissed. Okay, is it? You would say it's not theoretical. There's more of a basis for this than the civil terrorism thing is that a theory? That's a legal theory in a way that the RICO thing isn't. That's got a better shot, I guess you would say.
I think of civil terrorism as a theory that helps explain the phenomenon we're witnessing. Um, and that doesn't require any new laws to deal with. It just helps us make sense of the facts that we've all seen. It helps put them together a way that allows us to see the trees for the forest, and might help us clarify what legal remedies are appropriate for dealing with this phenomenon.
And I think in Boston, some prosecutors just filed a suit saying that there was inciting a riot and promotion of anarchy. Just regular old criminal, no need to be creative there. That's a law on the book. The Smith Act made sedition and treason illegal. Why not go for existing laws on the books? Or is that like my RICO thing where it would be an application that's like totally not contemplated in the original writing of the law?
It it varies by state. Um,
Yep.
not all states have operative anti-riot statutes, or they may not be geared towards the right tactics. But the truth is that those laws don't go after the nerve center, if you will, right? They don't go after the brain trust. They go after foot soldiers, right? Which, frankly, like to be crass about it, the people who actually do the activism are replaceable. right? These are not like the highest achievers in the world who think that they're, risking throwing away their entire career on some activism. They're mostly lowlifes and professional activists who will, pay their fine or serve their few weeks if it comes to that. And then they'll go back to doing what they do. The way to actually deal with the phenomenon, if you think that the phenomenon needs to be dealt with, the way to deal with uh, activist groups engaging in mass disruptive lawbreaking, possibly for highly subversive ends, is to go after the money and the organizers. And that requires looking at who is conspiring. So, one proposal that has been floating around, I think Senator Cruz proposed the Funders Act, which just makes rioting a predicate act for RICO. So that just like more cleanly connects the dots between uh, people in grant-making organizations uh, encouraging this kind of rioting activity and the rioting activity itself. I don't think it's totally necessary in order for criminal or civil prosecutions to proceed, but it does make it a lot cleaner. It would make it a lot cleaner. It's not good law.
Hmm. All right, to drag you down into the tax law now, fiscal sponsorship is also mentioned in Westpac, by the way, I think has been used the fiscal sponsorship mechanism. Uh, what could perhaps be done there, and isn't that maybe lower hanging fruit than RICO or the civil terrorism thinking?
Yeah, I completely agree. It is the lowest hanging fruit. It's a little bit, it seems arcane. It's not that complicated, but it seems like very wonky, dry stuff. But I actually do think that shoring up the fiscal sponsorship problem, the loophole, as many people call it, would really help. That would be a great first step. So just to go over what fiscal sponsorship is really briefly, though I suspect your audience is largely familiar, fiscal sponsorship is a some people call it a loophole. I'll just call it an arrangement where an existing registered nonprofit um, takes on a nascent, an up and coming nonprofit as a project, allowing that new nonprofit ostensibly to get off the ground. The new nonprofit, the fiscally sponsored organization, does not need to file its own 990. It does not have the same transparency requirements. It is essentially just an arm of the already existing nonprofit. This allows the new entity to raise funds through tax deductible donations uh, to the already existing organization, which is frequently, if not always, necessary for getting a new nonprofit off the ground. Before you can do anything, you need some few tens of thousands of dollars in the bank. Um, so it is an understandable arrangement. There's nothing inherently nefarious about it. I'll say two things about it though. One is that fiscal sponsorship was not legislated into existence. Uh, it emerged. It was not a decision of the American people that this was something that we wanted in our tax code. It kind of emerged in the interstices of tax law that this kind of arrangement is allowed, and then some IRS rulings uh, gave it legitimacy. Um, that's the first thing. No one voted for it.
Yep.
The second thing is that it is definitely being abused. I don't know that anyone, whatever their political leanings, would argue that you mentioned Westpac. There's a group called Alliance for Global Justice that fiscally sponsors some like 150 organizations and has a page on its website, or at least did at one point, that said like, you want to avoid government transparency? Just come be fiscally sponsored by us. We'll take a 7% fee of your fundraising, and then you can just kind of exist as a shadow entity, a phantom nonprofit, grafted onto the bottom of Alliance for Global Justice. No coincidence that many of the organizations that took advantage of that arrangement are precisely those that quite openly engage in unlawful activity, uh, encourage revolution and occasionally violence against the American government, all kinds of questionable, if not outright unlawful activities. In terms of taking advantage of the low-hanging fruit and actually dealing with the fiscal sponsorship problem, it is not that hard. There are really two main proposals that are kind of out there among those of us who are thinking about this. Um, that could be legislated or possibly even just regulated into existence. I don't think that I'll have to look into the mechanisms of how this could become good law, but here's what the policies would be. One is um, create an official agency relationship between the fiscal sponsor and the fiscal sponsee, such that if the sponsee organization, does illegal activities, the sponsor can be held accountable for it, which is kind of just like taking the notion of being a project of the sponsor seriously. If you're going to be an arm of an existing nonprofit, that nonprofit needs to take some accountability for your actions. It can't give you all the benefits with none of the responsibility. Um, that would probably cause many sponsoring organizations to cut ties with bad actors just to save their own skin. That's one option. Another is to time limit the fiscal sponsorship program, recognizing that it is meant to help new nonprofits get off the ground. So maybe you have 6 months or a year or 18 months or 24 months to do that. And then you have to start filing your own 990s or find some other way to do business. Now, of course, that leads to water always finds its level, and fiscally sponsored entities are not going to go down without a fight. They'll probably just jump from fiscal sponsor to fiscal sponsor. You can mandate investigations for any individuals who register nonprofits or are involved with nonprofits that jump from uh, let's say a minimum jump to three fiscal sponsors, over the course of 15 years or something. Uh, don't It doesn't need to be a crime, just mandated investigation. We want to know what the deal is. Are you really slow getting off the ground, or are you trying to abuse the process? I think either of those would help solve a lot of the unlawful activity stemming from the nonprofit space today.
I don't know if you had this in the article or not. How about Foreign Agents Registration Act, either actual use of it, enforcement of it, or beefing up in some way? Might that be low-hanging fruit of some sort in this context?
Yeah, I don't know if it's low-hanging fruit. One, because the current administration has, if not disavowed FARA, has certainly said that they want to deprioritize it, and that would be quite a swing to now say, actually, we're going to use FARA for suspected subversive agents of other countries. Um, Fair is a bit of a Rico has been described as a bomb. Fair is a bit of a bomb also.
Mm-hmm.
I do think in some cases it is probably appropriate because there's very good indication that we have nonprofits that are 1 degree removed from the Chinese Communist Party or the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps, other hostile foreign entities. um, I'm just not sure that that's the place we want to jump. That's a pretty serious charge, and I wouldn't call it the lowest hanging fruit.
Okay. How about you mentioned abuse, political leanings. Would you, I don't know, acknowledge, concede that any or all of these measures that we're sort of contemplating and about what you've written could be abused if applied selectively to say, oh, I don't know, progressive groups? Can you name three conservative groups that should be fretful, fearful, if not in this administration, the next one, if these measures were taken, passed?
Yeah, I can't name conservative groups that are currently like organizing unlawful activity. Um, certainly the weaponization of government investigations against disfavored nonprofits is something that worries me. Um, that's why I like drawing hard lines, like violations of the law. I don't mean like suspected violations of abstract laws, like are you doing the bidding of other countries? That's why I'm a little bit wary of FARA. I mean like over like we're holding a sign that identifies us with a with an organization, and I'm blocking a road while doing it. There's just no question that that's unlawful activity, um, and it is clearly being affiliated with a nonprofit. I think that's it's just it is easy conceptually to distinguish between that and I don't like what you're saying. I'm going to investigate you and make your life miserable. With that said, that weapon is already out. That Chekhov's gun is on the stage already. Uh, right there's a lot of rumbling about this stuff during President Obama's administration about the weaponizing of the IRS against conservative groups. Um, that tool is available. The federal government has enormous, enormous investigative power that can be tantamount to the power to destroy a nonprofit. That would not be invented by a current administration. It would merely be utilized. I think if you utilize it in the way that power is meant to be utilized, you can't let the fear that it's going to be utilized in unscrupulous ways in the future restrain you. You have to do the right thing now. And if unscrupulous actors are going to use it um, in unconstitutional or otherwise violative ways, then raise hell about it when it happens and reinforce those distinctions. Um, I just I don't think that this is like an enormous escalation in the same process of political weaponization, as long as you confine your investigations to groups that really deserve it because they've been flouting the law.
Yeah. Anything, Tal, that I did not ask that you want to answer or ask yourself?
I would note maybe in conclusion that as I've started writing about this issue and the way that extremism has nestled into the nonprofit world. I've gotten a lot of feedback saying, Tal, you work at a nonprofit. Like, aren't you worried that people are going to come after the Manhattan Institute? And just more generally, shouldn't we be more hands off when it comes to the nonprofit sector? What a beautiful thing it is that we have such a robust civil society, that people care to give charity, to educate their fellow Americans, and to agitate for what's good and true and just. Um, and to all that I say, like, yes, that is a great blessing, but it's also not a total coincidence that malevolent actors would settle into the nonprofit space. It offers a kind of uh, legitimacy and comfort and shield from transparency that uh, bad actors would necessarily want. It's kind of a sweet spot to be a fiscally sponsored entity uh, where you can avoid talking about where your money comes from, even as your donations are treated as tax deductible. So I don't think we should be uh, shocked that there's some abuse of the nonprofit system going on. It's only natural. And I say to those who want to preserve our robust civil society and the nonprofit sector, you need to reinforce those boundaries. You're going to lose the nonprofit sector entirely if you cannot get it under control. Americans are not going to stand for uh, tax deductions subsidizing domestic terrorism, nor should they. That's preposterous. We need to be able to trust the system, and that requires enforcing the rules that keep it honest and accountable to the American people. So I say to those who want to preserve the nonprofit sector, I'm with you 100%. I am. That requires enforcing the rules.
Well, Tal Fortgang of the Manhattan Institute, thanks so much for doing this with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.